Hi, everybody, and welcome to week 4 of Accounting 114. I'm Jeannie, and I'm your instructor for this course. Thank you for joining me today. Can you hear me okay? Great, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here. Here we are in week 4 already of the course. It's hard to believe this goes by really fast, and I have gotten some feedback from a few of you that have commented on the fact that you've learned so much about what your payroll should be personally and some skills you might want to use later in life, but things that you thought you knew about payroll, now you know what's kind of behind all the stuff that you knew about payroll. So a little more in-depth understanding of what payroll is all about. So that's the whole idea, is to give you that kind of knowledge. And really, that's what I said in week 1, that I think is one of the neat things about this course is not only are you learning accounting skills that will help you in your profession later on, but it's also giving you some skills to help you with your paychecks that you're receiving right now as an employee, to really understand things a little bit better. So it's a win-win for you guys. So I hope you really enjoyed the class, and I'll finish off strong in this week. This week is kind of like a little bit of review of what we've covered so far. The project that you're going to work on this week is a pretty extensive project, and this is a Portfolium exercise for you. So you're going to need to go into Portfolium to do this. And the neat part about Portfolium, I think you guys have used it in the past, maybe not. Have you used Portfolium yet? Okay, so you're more familiar with it than I am, actually. That I have been trained briefly on it, but this is the first class that we've had a Portfolium assignment in. So it's going to be a new experience for me too. But Portfolium is really neat for you guys because you're able to accumulate a lot of your experience and the assignments that you've done, and be able to demonstrate to that to people as you go out and try to get a job. You can show them what your expertise is in and what your experience is in, what you've been trained in, all of those kind of things. So it's going to be very helpful for you. This assignment is going to go right along with what I just said. It's going to demonstrate your understanding of payroll. We're going to start from the very beginning. That's a great idea. Michelle says she lists it on her resume. That's perfect, because it gives your potential employers a chance to go look at what you've done. But we're going to start with employees, and you're going to be given just minimal information about the employees, and you're going to have to work through the entire payroll that you do, and then add that to payroll history, do a pay stub for an employee, do a W-2 for the employee, do a 941 return for the employer. So there's lots involved with this week's assignment. So please make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time to get this assignment completed. We're going to go through some material, and really the material today is going to be a lot of review. I do have a video that I wanted to show you that is going to go over how to complete the 941. So since you're going to have to do that, it's pretty extensive. So I just went ahead and stuck a video in here to help you with that 941. So we'll go over that. But a lot of what we're going to cover today, we've talked about briefly in the first 3 weeks, but it's stuff that's going to come up in your assessments this week, and for sure going to come up in your assignment. So we'll go ahead and get started with that material. As always, if you have questions along the way, please just stop me or type them out, or however you want to get those across. Some of the things I'm going to talk about today, I just want to highlight because there were some issues with them. This was one with the overtime pay. There are 2 different ways to calculate overtime pay. The first one is the most common method that you will see. This is the one that most employers use, but they have the option of using 2 different kinds of overtime calculations, and one is the premium approach and one is the regular overtime approach. The funny part is most employers really don't even know that this overtime premium approach exists, because they are so commonly, the regular calculation is most commonly used, and that's what everybody's familiar with. So It does, the overtime premium approach does have some advantages to the employer as far as workers' comp and things like that, but um, really rarely used because it is kind of confusing to employees when they see their overtime rate calculated the way it's calculated. They think they're being shorted on their overtime. So a lot of employers just use the time and a half rate, um, which is more clear to employees and what is really expected from the employees. So you can see at the top of the page, we're going to use the regular overtime calculation in this week's assignment as well. So I wanted to just touch on that briefly. And all that is you take the employee's hourly wage, which in this case, in this example, is $15.25, and you multiply that times 1.5, which is time and a half. So that is giving you the rate that you're going to use for any overtime hours that that employee has. In this example, Albert worked 44 hours, and in a normal 40-hour work week, that would mean that there are 4 hours of overtime. Remember that it is not a requirement that there is a 40-hour work week, and it's up to the employer to make that determination. That if there is more than the normal hours in the week, that it's considered overtime. But if, of course, just like the overtime part of it, 40-hour week is kind of a standard week, and most employers use that 40-hour week. I worked at a place that had a 37.5-hour work week, and that was the standard work week. So anything beyond that, we were paid overtime for. So it really just depends on the employer as to how they set up their work week. And it has to be clear to everybody what the work week is. So overtime is calculated on the correct hours. So it works either way though. So I just want to make that clear. So make sure, in most cases, if it's not listed, just assume that it's a 40-hour work week. But if it is, make sure you pay attention to that, because there is the potential for the employers to have a little bit different work week than what you're accustomed to. So in this case, we have a 40-hour work week. If Albert works 44 hours, we're going to have 40 hours at his regular $15.25 per hour, and then we're going to have 4 hours that are at his overtime rate that we calculated at $22.88 per hour. So to come up with the total earnings, remember to add the regular earnings with the overtime earnings to come up with total earnings for that person. Okay, don't forget to add in the regular earnings as well. We're not just doing overtime. So some of the stuff I'm going to talk about are just errors that I've seen in the way everybody's doing their calculating as we go, just so we can cover some of these things. Are there any questions about overtime? That's pretty simple, so I imagine we're okay with overtime. Okay. So let's talk about deductions. So this is where a lot of the calculation we're going to do is based off the deductions for the employees. We talked about Social Security, which is OASDI, and we talked about Medicare, which is HI. Those are used interchangeably. The biggest problem I saw there were two biggest problems I saw with the calculations for these. First is ignoring that wage base. Remember, OASDI has a wage base of $132,900. That means that you're only going to apply that 6.2% to wages up to that $132,900. Anything over that does not have any OSDI attached to it. So anything beyond that is going to be 0% as far as calculating the OASDI. But we're going to use that 6.2% up to that wage base. But in the assignment this week, a lot of people ignored that wage base completely and just did the calculation of the 6.2% on the wages. So keep in mind, for OASDI or for Social Security, there is a wage base of $132,900. So that is the ceiling. If the wages hit above that ceiling, then it's 0% for Social Security. On the HI part of it, on Medicare part of it, there is no wage base. So regardless of the earnings that the employee has, there's going to be a 1.45% withholding done from that employee for the Medicare tax. The second biggest problem I saw, well, I guess there's three now that I'm thinking about it. The second biggest problem I saw was converting these percentages into decimals to do your multiplication. So remember, 1.45% is 0.0145, and 6.2% is 0.062 if you're doing it as multiplication. So a lot of people had those decimals in the wrong place, and obviously that makes a huge difference when you have that in there, whether it's, if you have 0.145, that's going to give you 14.5% instead of 1.45%. So obviously that's going to be a huge difference. And finally, the third thing is that asterisk at the bottom. This is confusing to a lot of people, and I know that it's confusing, but it has to be included in here because that's the law. Any wages that go over $200,000, you're going to add an additional 0.9% for those wages that go over $200,000. And that's for the employee only. The employer does not need to match that amount for the Medicare side of it. So in this case, if you have employees that are making over $200,000 in the year, the employee and the employer Medicare are going to be different. Otherwise, if everybody's under $200,000, you're always going to have the exact same amount for the employer and the employee for both Social Security and Medicare. Okay, so when you're looking at your worksheets that you're doing, those should always match. The only time that they're going to be different is if you've got those employees that have those wages over $200,000. Then there's going to be an additional amount for the employee side. Okay, so these should be the same for employer and employee. So I want to look at a couple examples because this was a little bit confusing, and these were examples we went through before, but I just wanted to go over them here. On the left, Ron Brown, employed by Garnet Company, earned $475 during the week ended January 27th. Prior to January, his cumulative gross earnings were $2,765. So to calculate FICA on this, you calculate two different branches of FICA. The first one, Social Security or OASDI. You're going to calculate 0.062, which is 6.2%, times the earnings from that period. That was the other thing. Make sure you're using current period earnings and not year-to-date earnings. Take 6.2% times 475 will give you your OASDI of $29.45. And then the HI, or the Medicare part of it, the 0.0145 is 1.45% times 475 to give you $6.89. And again, the one thing I caution you about, and I talked about this last week as well, when you're doing these calculations, look at the reasonableness of what you're doing. If you've got a person that makes $475 a week for their paycheck, and you end up having $290 of OASDI deduction, obviously there's something wrong with your calculation because you're not going to have that much of a deduction come out of your check. And that you can see, you would know as an employee too, if you would see something like that, you think, wait, something's totally wrong here. And that's the case with this as well. Just do that reasonableness check and say, if this were me getting a $475 check and I saw that Social Security was taken out at $290, I would have thought something's a little bit weird there. So go back and double check and look at your calculations and see if they make sense. On the right-hand side, we have Frank Blue, who is a salaried employee of Wrench Constructions, paid every Friday. He earned $1,925 for this pay. Prior to this pay of November 15th, he had earned $132,750. The FICA taxes are as follows. So we know on this case, the wage limit is $132,900. And to date, he's earned $132,750. So we know that the only amount that is going to be subject to the OASDI or Social Security is going to be the additional $150 of his current $1,925 pay. Because his year-to-date earnings before this pay was $132,750. And then of his $1,925 current earnings, we're only going to tax $150 of it because then we're going to be over that taxable wage limit or the wage. So that $150 is going to be taxed at 6.2%. So you're going to withhold $9.30 of OASDI from that $1,925 check that Frank received. And on the HI side, since there is no wage base on this, we're going to take the 1.45% times the amount of earnings for the current period to come up with the $27.92. Okay. And the other two, we don't have to go over these in detail. I just want to, oops, sorry about that. Just want to point out the fact that for the taxable wage limit is 132. If the employee has earned more than that, you're going to have a zero amount withheld for Social Security, and for HI, of course, we're going to do the calculations on that as well. On the right-hand side, you can see the additional calculation of HI for employees that have over 200,000. So it says in this example that prior to the pay, Sean had earned $200,000 prior to this current pay, where they're paid $5,000 a week. So the OASDI calculation, obviously they're over the wage base, so there's no taxable wages. OASDI is going to be zero. And on the HI side, there is no wage base, so you would calculate the current earnings of $5,000 times the 1.45% to come up with $72.50. But additionally, since the employee has already earned the $200,000, their current check of $5,000 is going to be completely taxable at that additional 0.9%, which is 0.009. So you've got an additional $45. So the total HI, or total Medicare, to be withheld from this employee's earnings is going to be $117.50. Okay, do you guys have any questions about OASDI or HI, Social Security, Medicare tax, or FICA in general? Okay, sounds good. All right. This week, last week we talked about the percentage method and we talked about wage bracket. And I think wage bracket was a lot clearer because I think that you guys understood how to pull these numbers a lot easier for the wage bracket method. The only thing that I did see that went wrong with this is some people were using the wrong tables. So make sure when you're using the wage bracket, and I have those highlighted here, that you are using the correct filing status and the correct frequency of pay before you do your dollar amount and your number of allowances. That's where the biggest problem comes in with these, is just to make sure you're on the right table. And there's so many of them, and you keep flipping back and forth. Sometimes you just lose where you are and use the wrong one. So just make sure you double check before you use that you are on the right table. I would suggest you use the bracket method for your homework assignment unless you're not able to. And you saw in the last week's assignment where some of the earnings went over what was allowed in the bracket. And you can take a look at, just one second here. Let me get to the wage bracket. Okay. You can see on here, you can see those wage bracket tables, and this is for a single person with a weekly payroll. If you go down to the bottom, you can see this here that says if there are wages that are $1,547 and over that, you cannot use the wage bracket method for this employee. You have to use the percentage method. So make sure if it does hit that amount that you are going back and using the percentage method that we talked about last week. Okay, so I know nobody really likes the percentage method because it can be kind of confusing. I understand that. But in some cases, it's a requirement. So make sure you're using the right method for that. Okay, let me get back on. Pull my tab so I make sure I'm not missing anything from you guys. Okay, so percentage method. And I'm going to go ahead, and these are the steps, but I want to go through, let's just go through this example, and I'm going to walk through it one more time. I apologize for the little background decor on the left there. Um, we'll just walk through these step by step because this was confusing for a lot of people. And I tried to help you out with the calculations I did um, in my lecture last week. But some people found it even a little more challenging at that. Oh, I do want to point out one thing that we did encounter in our calculations. So you can see table 3 is a semi-monthly payroll period. It's just an example I pulled out to show you on here. Um, the A side or the left side is a single person. The B side on the right side is a married person. And if you read at the very top of, we're looking at the A side now, it says if the amount of wages after subtracting withholding allowances is not over $158, the amount to withhold is $0. So anytime if your wages don't end up on those categories to the left there, the over but not over amounts, then the withholding is going to be 0. So there should never be a time where you have negative amount of withholding on somebody's check. If you think about that, that really doesn't make sense. A negative withholding amount is actually adding pay to your employee's paycheck. So when you do your calculations at the end of the year for your 941 or at the end of the month to make payments, that's going to mess up your calculations completely on your tax return. So there is never going to be a negative withholding on the employee's check. So make sure that you're reading these tables carefully because it explains exactly how you need to go about this. And actually, the Circular E, which is right here, goes through an example in the Circular E. And I know a couple of you have mentioned that you read through the Circular E, and I'm very happy to hear that you did because there's some great information in here. But this is another example. They have an example in here. You can see that in the center of your screen there of how to calculate the withholding for the percentage method. So I kind of did that same thing, but a lot of people were really confused as to how to go about this method. Oh, Michelle, that's great. She said she printed it off. And this is updated every year, because obviously there's new withholdings every year and there's new policies that come up every year. So don't just assume that the one you have then is going to be accurate every year. So make sure you're doing updates every year. Okay, so anyway, that is on the Circular E, and there was an example in there as well. But it kind of walks through what you need to do, and it can be a little confusing, but that's why we set up that little step-by-step thing we did in Excel last week, and this kind of walks you through the same thing. So let's talk about our process here. It says the first step is determine the amount of gross wages earned, and if the wages end in a fractional dollar amount, round the pay to the nearest dollar. So we've got Art Gomez, who is single and claims 2 allowances, and he earns $1,016.60 semi-monthly. So in the first step, we're going to round the wages to $1,017. And then in step 2, we're going to multiply the number of allowances claimed by the amount of 1 allowance for the appropriate payroll period. Payroll periods can be bi-weekly, semi-monthly. We know already he's paid semi-monthly. So we look at the table that's provided in the Circular E, and it says 1 withholding allowance is $175 for a semi-monthly person. So we're going to take the $175 and then we're going to multiply it by the number of allowances that he has on his W-4. So that is 2 there. You can see that allowance. So we'll take 175 times 2 to come up with the withholding allowances of $350. Now we take the amount from step 1, which is the rounded earnings of $1,017, less the amount we calculated in step 2 of $350 to come up with the excess wages. So then we move on to step 4, because step 3 we really didn't do anything with. We just did the quick calculation of ones we've already calculated. Then step 4, we determine the withholding tax on the excess of wages over the allowances by using a percentage method withholding table. So based off those tables that we have in our Circular E, this is just a snapshot of one. Remember, he's single, so you would use the left side of the semi-monthly table here, and you can see it says his wages, the $667 excess wages, fall within this range I have highlighted here. So we are going to take the amount that's over $563 because that's what it's giving us in here. So the first thing we do is we're going to say, okay, we're going to figure out the excess over 563. So we take his excess wages less the 563 to come up with $104. So then it says we're going to multiply 12% of those excess amount. So we take $104 times 12% to come up with the $12.48. And then we're going to add that to that $40.50 that it shows in that table to come up with the withholding for that person. So there are several steps that you need to go through and in order to use this percentage method. And that's why I recommend for your portfolio assignment that you're going to do this time to use your bracket method if available. Because it's a lot easier, really. As long as you are on the right table, you just kind of go down and find, use your rulers or a highlight like we did last time with a little highlight bar, and makes it a lot easier. Okay, do you guys have any questions about these deductions? Sean, I think that is a very common statement. The last part was the confusing part, and really step 4 is really the confusing part, because it's kind of, yeah, it is kind of confusing because the way it's worded, you have to kind of break it down, and that's why I was trying to do it in those steps like that we did on the homework assignment or the homework example last week, because it is confusing the way it's worded. So you just have to go through it step by step, figure out what this piece is, and then multiply it by this part, and then add it to this part. And so it is kind of complicated. So you were not alone. There were a lot of people that were very confused about that part. So, okay, this week, a lot of your assessment is based off of the returns that employers do. So there are lots of returns that are out there for payroll, and I think I mentioned last week when we talked about outsourcing that a lot of people outsource their payroll just because of this. They don't want to have to deal with these forms and the deadlines for when the returns are due and all of that. So it can get very confusing. Before we continue on here, I do want to point out, because one of the questions that you're going to have in your assessment deals with the when things are due. And I know that we talked about this last week, but I'm going to bring it up again, and I got to find it. Okay. In here is the calendar, and this is going to show you when everything is due. So you can use these in your Circular E to figure out when your returns are due. So you can see that, well, this is W4, but and those some employers have you fill out a new W4 every year. So that could be, and especially if they claim an exemption, you have to have a W4. So the exemptions, they can check a box on their W4 that says that they're exempt from withholding. And if they check that box that says they're exempt, it means that you are not withholding for them. But they have to complete a new W4 every year if they've checked that box. Okay, so make sure you go through here and you can read about when everything is due during the year, when to file things, but also for each of these returns that we're going to talk about, the IRS has some instructions that you can use, and it has all of the filing information in there as well. So take a look at those, because those are going to be on your assessment this week. Every employer who's required to withhold income taxes from wages or who is liable for Social Security taxes must file the following. So a quarterly or an annual tax and information return, which is a 941 or a 944. So this return shows the FICA wages paid and the total FICA taxes and the federal income tax withheld. So this is all added together that is filed usually on a quarterly basis. The employer makes deposits to these after they do their monthly calculations. A lot of times if you have a big payroll, deposits are made immediately after the payroll's done. So it really just depends. The returns don't need to be filed until the quarterly or annually, depending on the company size and the amount of payroll that they have. But the company makes deposits. So as the payrolls run, and this is how we did ours at the last job I was at, when we ran our weekly payroll, we would make a deposit to FICA, and which includes both Social Security, Medicare, and the federal withholding. We would do that after the end of each payroll that we did. And that deposit then is sent electronically, which the IRS requires those payments to be made electronically now, is sent electronically to the IRS, and it's stored in your bucket basically. So our company had a account set up, and those deposits are stored into your account as you do the payroll, and then they're reconciled when your returns are done. You put that information on your return, and the IRS then double checks to make sure it received the amount of money that it was supposed to, and make sure everything reconciles. So that's basically what it comes down to. Of course, we talked about how strict the penalties are for not filing these returns and also not making those deposits. They are pretty hefty penalties. We talked about that last week, and really can have criminal attachment to that as well. So not just the dollar amount that we have, there's a criminal element to that as well. So it's important that those are filed on time and effectively. So one thing I wanted to show you, talking about the 941. Let's get back to our this sheet. Okay, we've got 941 that's online here, and here's a payment voucher, which, like I said, they're filing everything electronically now. But this is what the voucher looks like to make a payment with your. Yes, Michelle, I'm sorry. Yes, quarterly is every 3 months, because it's going to happen. Obviously, it's going to happen 4 times a year. So it's January, February, March is quarter 1. April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December are the 4 quarters. But anyway, you've got the information in here, and if you have specific instructions here on the right of how to fill things out, and we're going to go over this because this is part of your assignment. So I want to go over how we complete this 941 later. And like I said, I've got a little video that I'm going to show you as well. Okay, so let's keep into here. Annual return for the withheld federal income taxes, 945. This is the return that covers non-payroll items like backup withholding, withholding on gambling winnings, pensions, annuities, IRAs, military retirement, kind of the miscellaneous stuff. So the things you really want to focus on is that 941. That's going to be really the biggest return that you're going to worry about. Some other forms, this is what it looks like. Okay, let's go ahead and we'll run this video. It is kind of long, and I apologize for that, but there's a lot to it. So I want to make sure that you guys are really clear on how to complete this, because you're going to have to do it for your own. So I apologize for the length, but I want to make sure you get it all in. So I'm going to play it, and then we'll stop and see if you guys hear it okay.
Hi, welcome to Easy Payroll Guide. My name.
You guys hear okay? Okay, thanks.
Ms. Karen Hutchinson, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to complete the IRS 941 form. This is the employer's quarterly federal tax return. This form is due at the end of each quarter. So, for example, quarter 1 ends on March 31st. This would be due by April 30th. So, April 30th, July 31st, October 31st, and January 31st are the due dates for the IRS 941 form. This form is going to detail all of the tax liabilities for that quarter. This is how the IRS reconciles your W-3 forms. So you want to make sure that the information on this form is correct. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a scenario of a small business who had 3 employees. And I've taken the information from their paychecks and I've put them into an Excel spreadsheet. And this is something that you could do as well for your record keeping in order to help you to complete or just to check the 941 form. So I have 3 employees and I've included their gross pay for each employee. And then in the last column, I've totaled the gross pay. So my total for gross pay is $25,465.27. I've also included in the spreadsheet the taxes that were withheld from each employee's paycheck. Now this is just the employee portion of the taxes. So I've included the federal withholding that I've included from each paycheck, the employee Medicare portion, the employee Social Security portion, and I've included the state withholding. The state withholding we're not going to need to use for the 941, but I wanted to point that out. This is only federal taxes that are going to go on the 941 form. So we are going to be using this portion, not the state portion, in the 941 form. Okay, now this is the federal withholding, so Medicare and Social Security for the entire quarter. So this is what my employees have been paid for all of January, all of February, and all of March. No, I'm sorry, we're doing 4th quarter. So all of October, all of November, all of December. So it doesn't matter. For 3 months, these are the totals. Now, along with withholding and paying taxes for your employee, you also must pay an employer share of those taxes. So when you made your deposits, you would have multiplied the Medicare portion by 2 and the Social Security portion by 2 because the employee is paying half, but you're paying half as well. So as you can see here in blue, the Medicare portion for the employee and the employer are the same, and the same for Social Security. So these taxes were paid as well and will be noted on the 941 form. So in this red box here, I've kind of just summarized what we're going to be using for the 941. We're going to need the total gross pay that you've paid all 3 employees for all 3 months of the quarter. You will also need to know the withholding total and the total Medicare and Social Security paid. It will not be broken out by employee and employer on the 941 form, but you may want to keep those records for yourself. And then just the total that you've paid for the quarter and your deposits that you've made. And then I also just recorded the deposits that were made for October, November, and December as well. These 3 deposits should total the total paid right here. Okay, so now let's take this and let's look at the 941 form along with it. So this is the same spreadsheet, and we're going to use this information here in the red box to help us to complete the 941. So when you begin, the top of the 941 is pretty much just your personal business information, and you want to make sure that you check the right quarter for which you're filing the 941. And then we're going to start with line number 1. Line number 1 is just simply the number of employees who received compensation for the quarter. So in this particular example, I've paid 3 employees for the quarter, so I'm going to write the number 3. Line number 2 is the total wages, tips, and other compensation that you've paid, and this is where you will come to your spreadsheet, and as you can see, I've paid a total of $25,465.27. And there's a decimal there for you. I accidentally put the decimal in, but you can use their decimal there. Okay, so for number 3, It's the federal income tax withheld from wages, tips, and other compensation. So this is the withholding tax that you've withheld from the employee's paycheck. So that is this number right here, the $3,153. So that number we're going to put in here for the federal withholding. Okay, there's no employer match for federal withholding. That's strictly the amount withheld from the employee's paycheck. Number 4 says that there are no wages, tips, and other compensations subject to Social Security and Medicare tax. Then you'll check this line and go to line 6. But we have paid Social Security and Medicare, so we are going to complete 5A through 5F technically. So 5A is the taxable Social Security wages. And again, this is not broken out by employer and employee. So we're going to include all the wages here that we paid. And this number is going to be the exact same as the total wages that you've paid, because all of the wages that I've paid are subject to Social Security wages. So the $25,465.27 is going to go right here in column 1. And then you would multiply that by the Social Security rate, which is 0.124. So if I multiply this number times 0.124, I'm going to come up with a total of $3,157.69. And make sure that you do multiply by that number and you don't just take this number that you've calculated yourself, because there might be a couple pennies difference, which we're going to note on this form as well. I did not pay any tips, or my employees did not collect any tips, so I'm going to go ahead and skip 5B. 5C is the taxable Medicare wages and tips. So again, all of these earnings were subject to Medicare. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same number, which is the total wages that were paid. And this time I'm going to multiply by 0.029. That's the rate for Medicare. And when I multiply, and again, make sure you multiply, don't just use the number on your spreadsheet, you're going to come up with $738.49. And that's my Medicare portion. And as you can see, yes, there's a few cents difference, and that's okay. That will be reconciled here a little later. So again, I did not, my employees did not collect tips, so I'm going to skip 5D. And in 5E, we're going to add column 2 from lines 5A, B, C, and D. So I'm going to add together the $3,157.69 and the $738.49. And when I add those together, I'm going to come up with a total of $3,896.18. And that is line E. 5F is tax due on unreported tips. And again, this is something that I don't need to worry about for this business because the employees did not collect tips. So line 6 is the total taxes before adjustments. And for this line, we're going to add lines 3, 5E, and 5F. So I'm going to take my Social Security and Medicare wages and add it to the income tax that was withheld from my employees' paychecks. And when I add those two numbers together, I come up with $7,049.18. So that's the total amount of taxes that are due. Now, line 7 says current quarter's adjustment for fractions of cents. And this is where we notice that our numbers did not exactly match the numbers on the spreadsheet. So here's where we're going to make up for that. Notice that we paid $7,049.16 through our deposits. and the total tax due is $7,049.18. So there's a 2-cent discrepancy there, and that's where we're going to note that 2 cents. So here we're going to have a negative 2 cents. We paid less, 2 cents less than what we're calculating on.
I just want to stop for one quick second and insert in here. The fraction of cents is usually very small. It's usually less than 10 cents if you've got an adjustment to make in there. So if you're filling out your return and you get to this point and there's a big difference between what your deposits are and what the adjustment or what the amount is on your return, then you've done something wrong in the return. So this literally is usually, like it shows here, 2 cents. It's usually something along that line. Very small amount. And like I said, 10 cents or less is what you would normally see. It's just a rounding, basically.
The 941. Okay, and that's okay. This is how we reconcile it. So current quarter's adjustment for sick pay, I didn't have any sick pay that I needed to adjust. And current quarter's adjustments for tips and group term life insurance, that's something else that I don't need to worry about. So my total taxes after adjustments are going to be the $7,049.16. So that matches, and you want to make sure that that matches the amount that you paid on your spreadsheet, which it does. So the total deposits for this quarter, including overpayment paid from 941X or 944X, this is basically how much money did you pay? And we paid the $7,049.16. Okay, and that's if you made your deposits on time and if you have truly paid them, which hopefully you have. So lines 12 and 13 are the balance due and the overpayment. If you did not make these payments on time, or if you still owe money, then this number would need to be adjusted and you would need to write the balance due here. If you have paid, then you're just going to leave these two blank. If everything's paid and you've paid exactly this much, which is what you owe. If you happen to pay over the amount for some reason, then you can state that overpayment here, and then you can either have it applied to the next return or they'll send you a refund. Okay, so again, yours might be a little different depending on your numbers and depending on your payments, but this is the basis for completing the 941. Now there is another side, so if you go to the next page,
there is a page 2 to this, but as things stand right now, our homework assignment does not include the breakdown for you to complete page 2. So I'm going to go ahead and stop right here because this was a long video anyway, but I'm not going to go through page 2. Basically, part 2 breaks down your individual payments that you've made. So it's a little more clear that you can see on the screen there, it shows month 1, 2, and 3. So you input each one of those tax liabilities for months 1, 2, and 3. And it just talks about what kind of payer you are. So we're going to skip this piece because on your homework this week, I'm just going to have you do that first page because we don't have those breakouts from month 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to go ahead and skip that. Do you guys have any questions about the video that you saw or completing that 941? It's pretty straightforward, but I think she reinforced it too. And I think one of the things that I wanted to reinforce in that is make sure that you do the calculations on that tax return, because you can see there was a slight bit of difference between using the calculations from the return and the deposits that were made, you know, those 2 pennies that we had. But use the form to do the calculations at the top, and then just take your numbers from your deposits of when you did the payroll, and it all balances out on the return, so it's not a problem. But just you're kind of looking at it from 2 different ways to make sure that you're reconciling. So it's a good method to use. This website that I have listed here is a fillable 941. So when you're required to do your 941, you can use this as your template, and we're going to use that when we go over your homework assignment today. So I'll show it to you there as well. Okay, so FUTA, we're not going to talk about this so much today. We did talk about this before, but I did want to point out that this is what the FUTA and SUTA is. You know, we talked about this last week of how to calculate these, but it is going to come up with the form of what the form is used for. This 940 is the annual return for your FUTA return, and this is to demonstrate the amount of payments for the FUTA tax that were made to the employees, or for on behalf of the employees. This is an employer-only tax that's done, so this is completed by the employer and submitted at the end of every year. But the 940 is the FUTA tax. Okay, so one of the things that you're going to have to do in this week's assignment is to complete a W-2. So I wanted to put that on here as well, and this is the last thing we're going to talk about, and then I want to go into go over your assignment with you. But this is what a completed W-2 should look like, and I just want to go over the boxes so we're clear about what is included in each section. And you know, I wanted to pull up and I didn't. I'll do that in a little bit. Pull up what the instructions for this, because there are specific instructions that are listed for each year for the W-2 as well. The IRS is really good about issuing instructions, believe it or not. And if you take the time to sit down and read them, it kind of walks you through everything, so it's pretty clear. But a lot of people are kind of intimidated by the tax returns and the tax forms and really don't want to take the time to sit down and go through the process. But the things you need to notice on here is just read the boxes and it'll tell you exactly what needs to be put in here. So employee social security number is at the top, and then the employer identification number. Employer's name is going to be in box C. Control number is not necessary. In box E, we've got the employer's first name and initial, and then their last name. And then their address follows that in box F. And then starting with the numerical boxes. Box 1 is the wages, tips, and compensation that relate to the federal income tax that was withheld. So the amount of wages that we have for federal withholding go in box 1. The Social Security and Medicare wages are in box 3 and 5, and you can see that those are different because of pre-tax deductions. And in your assignment this week, we are going to have some pre-tax deductions. The couple things we talked about this a little bit last week. Companies need to have an approved plan in order to offer pre-tax deductions. They are treated differently depending on what type of deduction it is. So we'll look at it in your homework assignment. You can see in your homework there are some pre-tax adjustments that are pre-tax for federal withholding, and there are some that are pre-tax for FICA and Medicare. So it depends on the type of pre-tax deduction as to which tax it is taken out before that tax is calculated. So that's why you will see the different wages that are related to box 1, 3, and 5. And you'll see that possibly on your W-2 as well. If you have pre-tax deductions that come out of your wages, you'll see that your boxes 1, 3, and 5 are going to be a little bit different. So federal income tax withheld, that's the amount that was obviously withheld by the employer on behalf of the employee for federal income tax. And then box 4 and box 6 are the amount of Social Security tax withheld. So this is just the employee part, and the Medicare tax withheld, the employee Medicare tax withheld on those amounts. I don't think we have anything for box 12, so we're going to skip box 12 altogether. Box 15 at the bottom is the state. The taxes withheld at the state level, the employer state ID number, which is different than the state, which is different than the employer's federal tax ID number. You've got state wages and tips, which is going to be usually going to be the same as box 1. State income tax withheld. So that's the amount that you'll see on your homework assignment as well, the amount of state tax that's withheld. And then if the employee lives in a local area that collects tax on a local side, you're going to have local wages and tips, local tax, and the locality that's being taxed there. So that's how you complete your W-2. And like I said, there is a copy of the instructions, and let me see if I can find that just one second here. Okay, so you can see that right here. You can see the link at the top. Those will help you walk through each line item, because these instructions literally will go through step by step of what's included and get down to those steps. There are, I promise. Right here where it says specific instructions for Form W-2, it'll walk you through what each box should be. So if you have a question about that, or if you're confused about what goes in there, just check that out. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'm going to take a look at your homework assignment. Your week 4 portfolio assignment, make sure you're logged onto your portfolio. I forgot. I just made a copy of it here so we can take a look at it. So there's lots of pieces that are going into this homework assignment. So it says for the assignment, you're going to complete payroll data and report that payroll. So below, and we're going to show you that in just a second, you'll find a spreadsheet with the following information. It's got employee names, their hours worked for the current period, their hourly rate, their year-to-date gross earnings, their marital status, the withholding allowances, and the pay frequency. And then from that information, you are going to first save it so you don't lose your work that you do. We're going to calculate the overtime rate for each employee, regardless of if they have an overtime hours there. Everybody needs to have an overtime rate calculated. For Rover's sake, pays time and a half for overtime at the standard work week of 40 hours. Then we're going to calculate the gross pay. And let me see if I've got, yes, here is what your template is going to look like. So we've got your employees here. We're going to calculate the overtime rate. So these yellow shaded boxes are ones that you're going to need to complete. You're going to have to figure what the regular hours are, what the overtime hours are, and then regular earnings, overtime earnings, and then gross earnings. And remember, your gross earnings is going to be the combination of your regular and your overtime earnings. And then I mentioned the fact that we've got some pre-tax deductions. So they are placed in the perfect spot in the spreadsheet to help you determine where they need to come out. So your gross earnings, you're going to take your gross earnings and you're going to subtract your health insurance deduction to come up with your taxable income for your FICA taxes. Okay, so that health insurance premium is going to be a pre-tax deduction for FICA, for Social Security, and federal income tax withholding. So those come out first. So we're going to go ahead and calculate. Then off of your taxable income, we're going to calculate Social Security and Medicare deductions. We're going to go through an example like this. So I'm just showing you what your template's going to look like, and then we'll walk through an example. And then your 401k is going to come out. So the taxable income for federal income tax is going to be your gross earnings less the health insurance, less your 401k to come up with the taxable amount to calculate your withholding off of. So that's going to go in here. And then this is going to be your withholding. We're going to use those bracket method to do that. And then income tax withholding for state, and then your net earnings. And remember, your net earnings is going to be your gross earnings less the health insurance deduction, less Social Security, less Medicare, less your 401k, less the federal income tax withholding, and less your state income tax withholding to come up with the net earnings. The other piece of this puzzle, we're going to look at, let's go back to your instructions. So we're going to calculate all of these items we did here through number 5. So number 6, it says to complete the last row of Annabelle's employee earnings record. So this is the first employee that's in this line here. This is her earnings record. And you can see this is her information. This is her job. This is her status, number of exemptions. This is what you would see if you went into one employee's information in the payroll system. She's claimed 0 with one allowance and what her pay rate is. And then this is her earnings record. So every payroll that's done, it was recorded in here. All of the information you just calculated was recorded in there. So when you're done with your calculations, down here at the bottom, you can see this yellow shaded spot here. That piece is going to need to be completed for the payroll that you guys are calculating up top. So just one employee. You're only going to do the total earnings for one employee. Okay, so you're going to add to this line down here with the information from above. So all of this information in this line only. You're going to take down to Annabelle's personal record down here and fill in all this information for this payroll. Okay, just those yellow boxes. And then the next step says create Annabelle's pay slip for the pay period that we're working on right now. So let's take a look at the pay slip. This is what the pay slip is going to look like. And oh, this is the one I did. Let me open the other one just one second. It's the one I completed for my example that I was doing. So give me one second here. Pay slips. Okay. So let's go back in here so you can see that. Okay, here is what the pay slip's going to look like. There are some shaded boxes that are kind of tan, I guess, shaded boxes. Those are the boxes that you're going to need to complete. And it's basically, this is going to be a pay stub, which is a pay slip. So when you get your check at the end of the week or every 2 weeks, however often you're paid, you get a pay stub with it that basically summarizes what is in your check. So you're going to put the employee's name here, the pay period end and the check date, and that's going to be given in that template that we just saw here. Let me find it. Up here at the top, this is the pay period weekend for its week for December 15th through December 21st of 2019, and then the payroll is going to be run on December 27th. So those will give you those periods right there. And then when you go down to gross pay and pre-tax deductions, remember that this is the current line and this is the year-to-date line. So for Annabelle, this is going to be only for Annabelle. You're only doing one of these. So for her earnings, you've got that sheet that we just went over that you can see up here. So you're going to be able to see all of her total earnings right here for the current period. And then you're going to see once you fill this out, then you're going to have all of her year-to-date information down here at the bottom. All right, so you're going to be able to use that information for her payslip. So use those. Your pre-tax deductions, we talked about those that are in the template already. There's the pre-tax deduction in there. Employee taxes that are filled out, any post-tax deductions that are done, and then what the net pay is. And again, it's the first line is current, the second line is year-to-date. Hourly, and I think I'm trying to get this changed here. This big box really should have a current and or regular and overtime pay, since we've got different hours and different rates for this. So I'm trying to get this piece changed. So hopefully we'll get that fixed before you guys need to submit everything. Again, over here, employee taxes, we've got our current taxes and then our year-to-date taxes. Same thing with pre-tax deductions. You've got 401k and health insurance amounts and the year-to-date amount. And then taxable wages. Remember that these are the wages, taxable wages amounts. These aren't the amount of tax. We did those up here. So these are the amount that you did the calculations based off of. And then your year-to-date, and then down here is going to be the net earnings. So this is the amount that the employee is being paid. Okay, so that's the pay slip that you have to fill out. And then you're going to complete the W-2. And we went over the W-2, so you guys know where all of those pieces based off of her annual earnings that you have. You can use that annual earnings sheet to fill out the W-2 for her. And then you're going to fill out the 941 based off of the following information. So you should be able to complete your 941 with this information that's given to you right here. So you know what the total taxable wages for Social Security Medicare are. You know what the federal amount that was withheld for federal withholding. And then you know what the deposits that were made for the fourth quarter. So we're just doing that 1 quarter there of earnings. Okay, so I want to go through an example. We're not going to have time to go through all of these steps today, but I think once we get started here and go through this, I think you will be fine with this assignment because it's all given to you in there. You just need to pull the information from the correct spot. I do want to go over just the calculations here on this page really quickly, just so we can refresh our memory about how to do all of these things. So we talked about the overtime rate being the hourly rate times 1.5. So the other thing I wanted to show you is the round calculation, which comes in really handy with payroll. Excel will automatically round the numbers, so it runs down to 2 decimal places, so it doesn't extend out like you see here for the overtime rate. Some companies round their numbers, some companies don't round their numbers. So it's up to you how you want to round this, but I round all of my numbers. So when you're doing your formula, I know you guys start with the equal sign, so you put round and then a parenthesis, and then you do your calculation. So you tell it, okay, I want to take the hourly rate times 1.5. When you're done with that, you put a comma and you put a 2 there because you're telling Excel you want to round it to 2 places. And then you close your parentheses there, and that will round that for you automatically. Okay? And as usual, we can just grab this and pull it down here to copy those down. So it'll automatically use that formula to copy that formula down. Okay, your hours worked are given here. So to figure your regular hours, remember it's going to be no more than 40 hours in this box here. If it's over 40 hours, you're only going to have 40 regular hours. But if it's under 40 hours, then that is the amount of regular hours that you have. Okay? And then overtime hours, going to be 0 there. It's going to be 12, 1, 0 there, 7, and 3. Okay, and then the next box we have regular earnings. So let's do our round again. And we're going to take our regular rate times our regular hours, and then we're going to tell it to round to 2 places. So that's going to give you your regular earnings. And we're just going to stretch that down here. Okay, and then same thing with overtime earnings. We're going to say, we're going to round to this one again. We're going to take our overtime rate times our overtime hours, and we're going to round that to 2 decimal places. Okay, since we had no overtime hours, we're going to have no overtime earnings, which is what we want to see. We'll just copy those down there. So now we have our overtime earnings and our regular earnings. So we need to add those two together to come up with our gross earnings. So those are gross earnings is also known as total earnings. And we'll just copy and paste that formula down as well. Formulas are so great because it saves you so much time of having to do each one of these. So try to use your formulas. Okay, this column says taxable income for FICA. So normally, if there are no pre-tax deductions, you would use your gross earnings. But in this case, we have pre-tax deductions for the health plan. So we're going to take our gross earnings minus the pre-tax deduction for our health plan. And that will give us the taxable income for FICA. And we'll go ahead and we're going to just move that down here. Well, we only have one employee here that doesn't have a health plan deduction, which is fine. It'll just carry that amount over there. So you can see in your, you're going to have year-to-date earnings here. We're still, that was not added on here. So we're getting that completed as we speak, because that is important for your Social Security calculation for sure, because you want to make sure that none of your employees have hit the wage limit. And I believe that none of them are going to be over the wage limit based off of their rates. So you're probably not going to have to worry about the wage base in this case. So we're just going to go ahead and do a straight 6.2% deduction here. So we'll take our, we're going to round. We're going to take our taxable income for FICA times the 6.2%, 0.062, and then we're going to round that to 2 digits. Okay, so that's going to be your deduction for the employee. This is all employee that we're dealing with right now. Okay. Medicare, the same thing. This is taxable income for FICA, means it's going to be the taxable income for both your Social Security and Medicare. So we're going to round this, and we'll take our taxable income times 0.0145, and we're going to round that to 2 places. Okay. So now when we come up to our taxable income for federal withholding, we're going to go back to our gross earnings, and we're going to subtract out both of our pre-tax items, our health plan deduction and our 401k, to come up to our taxable income for federal income tax. And we'll just copy that down here. Now is when we need to check the brackets. Oh, one thing I didn't tell you. All of your employees are going to be paid weekly. So in your homework assignment as well. So all we need to deal with is our weekly brackets. So let's go in and we'll go into here and way back here on our brackets. All right, so we are dealing with the first person is single with 1 allowance, and he or she has taxable income of $1,331. So let's get into our bracket for single with $1,331. Okay, so this is single person paid weekly. That's what we're looking for. And we're going to go down here to 1331. So she's going to fall within this bracket right here. She had 1 allowance, so we're going to use that second column there because the first one is 0. So we're going to have $180 of withholding for federal tax. So we'll put that in there. Okay, let's look at the second one. Single 0 and $545 of income. So we're going to go up a little bit, 545. So that person's going to fall into this bracket right here. And they had 0 allowances, so we're going to withhold $52 for that employee. Okay, next one is married. So we're going to change schedules. and they've got $458 of earnings. 458. So let's go to our married, paid weekly. That's what we're looking for. And 458. Right here, sorry, $458. So this person had 2 allowances. So we're going to withhold that $8 that you see there on that person. All right. Next one is married with 4, but this one has $622. So let's get back into there. 622. Married with 4. Sorry, just give me a second here. Married weekly still. So we want to go right here to our next column of 4 withholdings. And you can see that it's $7 right there. So we're going to put our 7 in there. Next employee is single 2 with 445. Single, so let's go back to our single table. Single weekly, and it's 445. So they're going to fall in here. And they've got 2 withholdings, so we're going to withhold $21 from their check. And then last employee is married with 3 and has 892 withholdings. Single, so we got to make sure we're in the married columns here, and 892. Okay, they're going to fall right in this bracket right here. She's got 3 allowances, so we're going to withhold $43 because that's right there. All right, the state income tax withholding is already calculated for you because every state is different, so we're just not going to worry about that. So our net earnings, remember, our net earnings is going to be our gross earnings less our health plan deduction, less Social Security deduction, less the Medicare deduction, less the 401k deduction, less the federal income tax withholding, and less your state income tax withholding as well. That will give you the net earnings. Remember, don't include these columns that say taxable income. Don't include those as deductions. Those are just for you guys to do your calculations for your Social Security and Medicare and also the federal income tax withholding. So when you're calculating your net earnings, don't include those in your deductions. All you're going to do is going to be gross. Here, I'm going to highlight the boxes. Those. And let's those in some weird color. So those are going to be how you calculate your net earnings. Okay. So that should be straightforward. Once you get that calculated out, let's go ahead and we'll just copy that down here. So then once you do that, I didn't do a whole year-to-date earnings for one of the employees, but I did want to walk through the pay stub with you. Let's see. Okay, so let me see if I can. Try to do this here. Okay, so this is the pay stub for Wilson. And just this is really, you are really more familiar than you know about how to fill out these forms because you see these in your paychecks all the time. So this is Wilson. This is the pay period. It's 2/21. The pay period end is December 21st. The check date is the 27th. And then the gross pay, you can see it comes right from the gross earnings column right there of $594.56. And then total pre-tax deductions are going to be the combination of the health care plan and the 401k. And then employee taxes are going to be the other one of those green shaded boxes. So we're going to have employee taxes are going to be the Medicare, Social Security, federal income tax withholding, and state income tax withholding. And those are going to be the employee taxes. And then the difference between those should be the net pay. So make sure that you're calculating that line correctly. You're going to be able to get this year-to-date information from that sheet that you're filling out with the year-to-date. I didn't do the year-to-date, so I didn't fill out these year-to-date amounts here. Okay, so remember I said here, and this should be regular, and then overtime pay here, the dates that were paid, they're just looping around, so you're not seeing the whole thing. But the number of hours that they worked, so 40 hours regular and 12 hours overtime, the rates that they were paid at $10.25, and then overtime rate of $50.38, gives you your current earnings here of $410 for regular and $184.56 of overtime. And remember, you've got year-to-date columns here that you can fill out from that year-to-date information. Then your employee taxes, you can see from up above, we calculated the OASDI or Social Security to be $34.07, the Medicare to be $7.97, federal tax withholding to be $52, and then state taxes of $2.50. Again, fill out your year-to-date information when you've got that information. Okay, pre-tax deductions. There is a 401k deduction of $4.10 and health insurance of $45. And then you can fill out your year-to-date information there as well. So taxable wages, we calculated those above. So for our Medicare and Social Security taxes, those are going to come from the taxable income for FICA. So that's going to come from this column right here. So you can see the $549.56 comes from there. And then after we do the deduction for the 401k, we've got the federal withholding, our taxable wages are $545.46. And then down here at the bottom, the amount paid is going to be your net earnings. Okay, so this is just a pay stub that you're filling out. Okay, so I didn't do the W-2. We went through that already because I didn't do year-to-date for all of these guys. I wanted to make sure that we got through just this piece of it here. But do you guys have any questions about any of this that we did? And you can see this is going to take you a little while to do because we've got lots of steps that you need to get done. The payroll calculation itself, you've got lots of pieces in that payroll calculation to do. So this is your template again for your homework assignment. And you've got several employees to do here. You've got 7 different employees that need to have all of this information calculated. If you use your formulas, it's going to go kind of quickly. You're not going to have an issue with that. But make sure you just go step by step. So do this first part first, and then you can add the information to her time record here so you can get your year-to-date numbers. And then remember when you do your pay slip, the pay slip is going to be, well, it's really for the paycheck that she's getting on December 27th. But as you just saw, it does include some year-to-date information as well. So you want to get that year-to-date stuff all together first before you fill out that pay slip. So do your calculations up here. Do your employee earnings record so you can get all your correct year-to-date information. And then go ahead and fill out that pay slip. And then after you do your pay slip, you're going to do your W-2. And you're going to get a W-2 form. Let's see if I have that here. I do. I have that here. This is what the W-2 that you're going to fill out. There's some of these things that you're not going to have the information for on this form. So employee social security number, you're not going to have that. So if the information is not provided to you, so employer's identification number, state ID number, even the employees, you know, the employee's name is for Rover's, oops, well, for Rover's sake can go in there. You can make up an address for them to put in here. Employee identification numbers usually start with 95, so you can put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 numbers after that. Employee social security number, you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 for the employee social security number, and then employee's first name is going to be Annabelle. So make sure you use all of the information off of that form that you're completing right here. So you've got her information right here. Oh, she does have a social security number. Sorry, 555-12-1234. So a little bit different. Okay, so if you've got the information, put it in here. Some of the stuff is not going to be available to you. So like the state ID number is not going to be available. Or whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want to put in here. Just make something up for those. You can do Utah here or whatever your state is, because that information was given to you anyway. It wasn't something you had to calculate. So make sure you're filling out the form completely, but if the information is not given to you, you can just put whatever information is available to you. Okay. And then the 941 after that is the fillable 941, and same thing. You've got the employer identification number, the trade name of the company, the address of the company goes in here, as you can see up here. And then make sure you're selecting Q4 that we're doing in here. As far as the templates go, you've got your initial template. This is going to come with the assignment. So you've got this piece, you've got the payslip, you've got this template is going to come with it, the W-2 is going to come with it, but not the 941. So that's why I gave you that link to the fillable 941, and you can see that here as well. If you don't want to use a link, just Google 2019 941 fillable return, and it'll come up with this. You can use this as a fillable item. But just use the information that was given to you in your instructions. Remember, it on step number 9 is what you're going to need for the 941. But make sure you're checking box for fourth quarter and then fill out your information that is available to you in that step 9, and you should be just fine. You can go back to the video we did, or there's other options you can look through. Like I said, you can Google instructions for the 941 if you have questions about each individual line, and it'll help you walk through that. We did have some instructions here on this fillable form as well. This is for the payment voucher, I think, though. Yeah, this is for the payment voucher. So you're going to want to find the instructions for the 941 itself. This is just the fillable. If you have questions about which steps are, and like I said, you can go back to the video we watched or look for those instructions, or you're welcome to ask me as well. Of course, I'm always around to help too. So go ahead and get those completed. So your documents that you need to submit are that first template that's got all the calculations for payroll and for Annabelle's annual. You need to have a pay slip attached to it and your 941. And those are in the instructions here, and the W-2 as well. So all of that needs to be uploaded into Portfolium. Okay, so that's where I'm going to grade those from, is from that Portfolium assignment. Okay. You guys have any questions? Okay, perfect. All right, and like I said, I'm around for this week if you guys have questions. I appreciate all your hard work in this class. I know this is not easy, trying to figure out all these different rules and regulations, so I know it was hard work, and I appreciate you guys working hard in this class. If you have any questions that come up this week, or even after you leave my class, I'd be happy to answer questions for you, especially about career things and directions that you're going, things like that. I'm around, so sure. Don't hesitate to ask if you have questions. Thanks so much for joining me, you guys, and I'll get this lecture posted into the announcements as soon as I get it uploaded, and should be good to go. Have a great day today. Thanks for coming.